did that also change the expectations the professors had from the students, in the sense that the standard which they were held to earlier on times, did that also get affected?
You know, it's been very interesting for me that the black students in particular keep on saying, don't drop standards. I don't want anybody to think because I'm black that University of Cape Town is still, it's in the top 120 in the world on any of the rankings. So it's a top ranked university on the continent. So every black kid wants to get into University of Cape Town because it's quite a prestigious institution to get into. And they themselves campaign hard for don't drop standards. Of course, the cocktail party circuit would tell you standards are dropping, but I take strong exception to that. And I've got many MSCs and PhD students who are as good as they were many years ago. And as I said earlier, what I really find incredibly satisfying today, I think I've got a reasonably good sense of humor, but I don't tolerate laziness. And when I've got a lazy student, I tell them, and I don't care whether they're black or white or yellow. And you can do that comfortably today because they appreciate it that you're taking an interest in them. And so I'm very excited about where we're going. We're coming out of a dark period in the history of the country with the corruption and that I mentioned earlier. But I think that we've got some incredibly exciting opportunities. When I look at some of the former graduates of mine who've gone into vice presidents of big mining companies, vice presidents of utility companies, and they've done well. So and they are the role models for the future.
You have made a number of notable contributions to the field of flotation or mineral processing in general, and also to catalysis. Is there anything which stands out in your mind which you have really enjoyed making that contribution?
Well, let me start with catalysis. One of the big projects that Sasol got me to work on was conversion of low chain length olefins, such as ethylene and propylene, into distillate fuels. We had a shortage, we had a serious problem in the country of the balance between diesel and petrol, gasoline. So we needed to produce synthetic diesel, long chain linear hydrocarbons. And Mobil had a catalyst, which was the magic catalyst. And in fact, I remember making 2 visits to Princeton, New Jersey, where the Mobil labs are. A chap called Paul Weitz, who was the head of the lab, now passed on, and Werner Haag, brilliant, wonderful people. Both people who left Germany just before the Second World War, both Jewish people. And they were so helpful to me, but we were never allowed to get the sample of the catalyst. So I said to Sasol one day, we're going to make it. And they said, how can you make it? Because you've got a patent, and you know what patents are like. They smoke and mirrors often. But we made ZSM5. ZSM5 was called after zeolite zirconi Mobil, which was the precursor of Mobil. And so we made ZSM5, and we did a lot of great research on that, to the point that a company called Sud-Chemie, which was then taken over recently by Clariant, gave us some really exciting projects to make zeolite beta, to make ZSM, what was the other one? 24, I think ZSM 22, and these were boutique zeolites to make high value chemicals. So that was great because we had this challenge, and that was because of sanctions. In fact, in those days, the only country that we were allowed to visit was Israel and Taiwan. In terms of my minerals processing side, I think it was quite interesting because my catalysis work, which, in fact, if I look at my CV today, I've probably got as many publications in catalysis as flotation. But I was able to transpose the surface chemical knowledge that I got through catalysis into flotation. So we're doing work today, for example, using microcalorimetry to determine heat of immersion and showing that it's a much better indicator than contact angle. And I've been using excess Gibbs free energy to show how, in fact, I can predict how a reagent, what contact angle you'll get from a reagent, or how is a froth. I sent that, my first paper on that, I sent to Doug first, and I said, Doug, can you look at it? And he came back to me and he said, at Berkeley, we never ever had our students doing thermodynamics. So They don't know what excess gives me. And so I think what I'm enjoying in my hobby years, so to speak, is using so much of the surface chemistry knowledge that you would know, because you are doing much more than I've ever done of that, to use those in minerals processing. Now, we know there's much more than just the surface reaction. There's all the hydrodynamics and so on, and I'm very lucky to work in a group which has got a very strong hydrodynamics group in flotation. We're doing flotation cell design, comminution. But I think we're ahead of the game relative to what I know in terms of using the classical surface chemical techniques, both theoretical, like we're using molecular modeling now quite intensively. And that I got from my catalysis days, to look at molecular modeling of molecules in the zeolite. They've got to go through this complex channel structure. So that I'm finding quite exciting.
You have very closely worked with industry, and they have been benefiting from your research over the years. And I'm sure they have provided quite a substantial amount of funding for your research. Has that scenario changed in the recent years?
Yes, it's changed. That industry won't give you money unless you're doing high quality research. And I've always said, as long as you're doing high quality research, the next check will be in the post. But when you're doing rubbish, and I've always said, you've got to produce top quality on time within budget. And with great respect to academics around the world, Brij, they're not renowned for that. They deliver high quality late or poor quality on time, and that doesn't work. So I think producing high quality research on time and within budget is a no-brainer. Industry will keep on funding you, and we were working a lot with Anglo Platinum because of the PGMs, but we've now diversified quite a lot. So we're doing a lot of work with Vale. We're doing a lot of work in Zambia on the copper belt with those complex copper ores. So we've diversified our source of income. All of our income still comes from industry. In fact, we get very little from the university. Is a petty cash item. And from the government, it's petty cash. So it's all industry money. And we've got 28 full-time research staff, all of whom are funded from industry money. And as I always say to them, your first job on the 1st of January is to bring in your salary for the year. Once you've done that, we can start smiling again. So there's a downside to that we mustn't just chase the buck. But on the other hand, they all realize if you just chase the buck, you're not going to get any more bucks. So you've got to do top quality research. And I think I've managed to persuade all of my colleagues that that's what we've got to do. The other thing I've done ever since I started my research groups, I built up a reserve fund, which we're allowed to do in our university. And I've built up enough reserve funds in both the catalysis group, which I've handed over, and the minerals group, that I can guarantee all of my full-time research staff 2 years of salary if the world fell apart. And that's a great reassurance to them. So they know that the money that they're bringing in, we're looking after it, we run it as a team, but it is more difficult to get the money. But I still think, firstly, if you don't ask for the money, you're never going to get it. And you've got to get out there and look for it. They're not going to come to you. You've got to go to them.
Has there been any downside to this model of funding?
Well, I think if I think nationally in South Africa, well, let me put it this way. There's been a downside, but it's been a challenge. About 10 years ago, Anglo Platinum came to me. I was on the verge of retiring, and they said they wanted to set up an organization, a company, which became South African Minerals to Metals Research Institute, SAIMM. And this was where all the mining companies would pool their money. They were worried that apart from the University of Cape Town and to a lesser extent University of Stellenbosch, even a university like Wits, which in the Peter King era was so strong, there was nothing happening. And we needed to rebuild. And the industry has been fantastic. Government then heard about it and said, can we join this venture? With reluctance, the industry let the government in, but that's been fine. So in the last 10 years, we've produced 68 higher degrees, PhDs and MScs, at 7 universities, and we really rebuilt centers of excellence. Like in our university, together with Stellenbosch, we've really got a strong centre of excellence in microtomography, which has really been building very nicely, in process mineralogy. Now, that didn't exist before. So we were able to buy QEM scans, and we were able to buy that sort of equipment. So I suppose the moral of the story is that the shortage of money made us think out of the box. We had to look for other models. And industry likes the model of joint venturing, so they don't have to put all their money into one basket. So I think it's helped us to develop different paradigms. Countries in the world's not awash with research money, as you know.
Yeah, moreover, the industry has been going a tremendous change. Globalization, mergers, acquisitions, so on and so forth. So how do you keep up with those kind of changes and keep the model still robust for funding purposes?
It's quite interesting, because at this SME meeting, I was talking to some people I know, and I said, these days you mustn't ask somebody, are you still working for whoever, because the chances are the company was bought out yesterday and they're working for somebody else now. But I think that the tragedy, when BHP Billiton and Rio Tinto essentially shut down their research labs, Anglo decided to keep theirs. And I always thought it would be a great business school study. And Anglo, that's 10 years ago, to see which model worked. And then sadly, Anglo decided to follow the same model. So as you know, the research centres in the companies, but on the other hand, it's worked to our advantage, because they've got no more research centres. So we are now running courses from we run in our research centre a training division. We are running courses for Anglo-American in their buildings where they used to house their research laboratories. So in a way, it's worked for us, but I don't think it's a good model, because unless you've got a strong research function in your company, you lose that culture. So I was saying to somebody the other day also, I've had a lot of postgraduates who are in industry, and it takes me a year to get them out of report writing to research writing, because they're in the model of the boss said I should do this work, I've done the report, there's the report. And I say, well, so what? So I think you lose that research culture. And I don't know, the cynics say it depends what the current model in the business schools is. The MBA graduates coming out now saying close down, and 10 years' time they'll say open up again. But I think the jury's out on, you take the old Mount Isa. I mean, look at the fantastic work, the Isa Mill, Bill Johnson, Graham Jamison, all those people in Australia. That's gone. Xstrata just did away with it. So I think the jury's out, Brij, as to who's right in cutting costs by cutting your research labs.
So, Cyril, in your career, you have been a very dedicated member of several professional societies, and I'm sure you have received a number of honors. So I would like to hear from you, when did you start it? Who inspired you to become a member of these professional societies? And what your contribution has been, and how have you benefited from being a member of South African Institute for Mining and Metallurgical Engineering?
Well, I think cynically, I think I'm a bit of a sucker. But I suppose in various walks of life that I've been involved in, I've often felt the urge. No, not the urge. People, to be quite honest with you, and I don't want to see this as my ego or anything, but often it's just happened that people have said, "Won't you come and we think that you can make a contribution," and I tend to say yes. So if I think about SAIMM in the early 80s was going through quite a tricky period, and we were building up a lot of research in the Western Cape. I had a good joint venture with Stellenbosch, and so suddenly minerals processing research in South Africa was mainly in the Western Cape, where there are no mines. It was always bizarre. Everybody always wondered why, and we always said it's theory: the further away you are from the mines, the better your research, because you're not tempted to do short-term consulting. Because if you go to Wits and Pretoria University at lunchtime, they've all gone off to do some consulting. Anyway, that's a cynical point of view. So the SAIMM contacted me one day and said, would I be prepared to set up a Western Cape branch? So I did. I had also at that stage with a chap called Jimmy Green at Stellenbosch, and then a chap called Jannie van Deventer, who eventually went off to Australia, became Dean at Melbourne University. We started in the first 2 years of my research. I thought it would be nice to get the industry to come down and see what our students are doing. I had 2 catalysis students and 2 minerals students, flotation students, my very first year. So I went to Jimmy at Stellenbosch. I said, Jimmy, you've got 2 students. Why don't we ask NIM and Anglo and the people who are at Goldfields, let's have a one-day get-together. Well, that's 1982, and that still continues to this day. It's become almost a de facto South African National Minerals Processing Conference. And that was simply, let's do it this year, and it worked quite well. Let's do it again. And so on the SAIMM side, I suppose that's what, eventually they were very kind. A couple of years ago, I got Brigadier Stokes medal, which is, it's 1 ounce of platinum. I always thought they should have rather given me 1 ounce of gold. At the time, 1 ounce of platinum was worth more. It's like recognition for your seminal contributions. So I became a honorary life member and et cetera, et cetera. So the SAIMM involvement has been part of my life. Then on my catalysis side, I did a sabbatical in 1985 at the University of Delaware with Bruce Gates. And so I started making a lot of contacts in the United States. And then I told you about Mobil and so on. And people used to say to me, don't you have a national catalysis meeting like the United States does in South Africa, because we'd like to come. So I remember in about 1986 or 87, I contacted some of the chaps at CSIR. They were doing good catalysis research. But apart from that, it was only my group. I said, why don't we form a catalysis society? Why do you want to do that? I said, well, if we've got a formal society, people will come because you'll have the Catalyst Society of South Africa annual meeting. And so I founded CATSA, it was called. And still today, CATSA now has grown tremendously, even though, we spoke earlier about downturns. So CATSA, eventually they gave me one of the Lifetime Achievement Awards. And so I'm very proud to have started that, because that's grown into, so it's South Africa's national catalysis body. Then I used to go to Taiwan a lot on catalysis research, and my Taiwanese friends said to me one day, and as you probably know, notwithstanding their politics, they had fantastic relations with their family often, still in mainland China. Why don't we form, there's the North American Catalysis Society, there's the Asian Catalysis Society, which is mainly Japan and Korea. Why don't we form the Indo-Pacific Catalysis? That's Australia, Taiwan, India. I knew Paul Ratnasamy well from Pune at the National NCL. So, in fact, Paul was great, because I said to Paul, why don't we form this thing? So I formed a thing called APCAT, Indo-Pacific Catalysis Association. And we had for 10 years it went very well. We rotated around. We went to Singapore, Pune, Cape Town, Sydney. And then the Japanese and Koreans, APCAT, they call it, the Asia Pacific Catalysis. They said, why don't we merge in there? And I was close to retirement by then, so they've merged into APCAT. So that was, it was serendipitous in a way, those things. Then I suppose, in terms of what other bodies, professional bodies, the Institution of Chemical Engineers, I have a lot of interest in cricket. And so I was chairman of our local cricket club, which is a very, very top cricket club in Cape Town. And the president of the local association contacted me today, when I stand for election to the executive. So again, like I'm a suck, I said yes. And so I spent 23 years on the executive. And when I retired from the executive 6 years ago, they made me a life member. I'm one of the 4 life members. So I can watch Test cricket from the Lani Suites without having to buy a ticket. So I suppose I've liked being engaged and being involved. if I think of the International Mineral Processing Council, obviously what happened there was a famous story which I don't want to go into because I'll bore you, but we wanted to bid. In 1993, I thought, it's about time. Mandela had been released. We were back in the world. Let's have a Congress in Cape Town. And the Sydney Congress was on, 93. And Jannie van Deventer and I went to meet with two people who will remain nameless. They were staying at a hotel at the Darling Harbour. And I said, can we have a meeting with you at 5 o'clock one afternoon during the Congress? What it's about? I said, well, we thought maybe, we don't know how do you bid for a Congress. We'd like to have one, but I don't know, as you may remember, there was no process then. So we got short shrift from them. No, it's too early for South Africa, and it's a small country, and so I was quite angry. So I went off to Aachen in 96, before the Aachen Congress, 97. Eric was president then, and Eric said, why don't you come to Aachen and make a bid? So I remember I arrived in Aachen. I literally got to Frankfurt Airport in the morning, got the train to Aachen, got there in time for the meeting. And when I walked into the meeting, there were already pamphlets for the 2003 Congress to take place in Quebec City. My good friend Fatih Abashi, he really printed pamphlets. So I said, what's going on now? Eric said, I don't know. I said, you told me I could come and bid, but I won that bid. And I won that bid on 2 slides. The one slide was an aerial photograph of Cape Town, and the other one was Mandela. I had a slide of Mandela, and I said, Mandela spent 23 years in jail, and you guys still can't give him a Congress. So anyway, then Eric said it was a very sloppy organization, quite frankly. But I got involved because we had won that Congress. And then in 2004, Eric said he thought it was time for him, but he had done a long stint. And he asked me would I come in and take over as the chairman over a gin and tonic. So I took over as chair, and as you know, my shelf life has arrived. And so I think my motto in life has always been get up each morning, shower, shave, go to work hard all day, bring a bit of work home at night, next morning get up, shower. If you do that every day, be amazed what things happen to you. And I suppose that's been a bit of my philosophy. Don't go seeking big positions. And I'm not saying that because I want to try to look like I'm a humble man. I'm simply saying that I think that's how life is. Work hard, and these things they're not honors. They are responsibilities. So when we, IMPC, as you know, because you've been incredibly helpful in so many things we've done, to turn it into a professional body. So, yeah, I don't think there's any grand plan there, Brij.
I mean, I know that you have won numerous awards, and you mentioned few of them. And very recently, you became a foreign member of the National Academy of Engineering in the USA. So how has your involvement, because you have done a lot for the professional societies, but how did it help you in advancing your career?
Well, I think there are 2 aspects. To get promotion in a university, if I talk about my career, as you know, all over the world, you're evaluated on your teaching, your research, and your contribution to administration, and so on. And I never saw my contribution to administration. Again, I don't want to make out as if I'm some great altruistic hero. I'm not. But those were responsibilities, and I was excited to get those responsibilities. I didn't want to duck away from them because they gave me challenges, but having those opportunities was a blessing. So I had an opportunity to serve in those positions, and that helped my career, no question about it. And even still to this day, I'm doing a project at the moment for our medical school, where they've asked me to help reorganize. We've got a fantastic hospital in Cape Town. It's world famous, the Red Cross Children's Hospital. It's an amazing hospital. And the chap who's the head of child health and pediatrics, he's just floundering, he's overloaded. So he's asked me to come in And I suppose I've got a little bit of a skill in organizational structure. I don't know. And so I'm trying to help them. I mean, it's an amazing hospital. They have 4,000 outpatients a day, and they've got 800 beds. Most of those are children, maximum 2 months old, from the rural areas. I was down there recently in the intensive care. There was a baby that size, and Andrew Argent, who's the head, said, you know, the equipment around this baby is R1 million worth of equipment. He couldn't give this baby more than 60 milliliters of liquid a day. It was all computer controlled. So I'm simply saying that because that to me is a privilege, to be asked to come and help out, see if you can get better systems in an organization where everybody's a hero. So I'm simply saying that I think to get those opportunities is a privilege.
You mentored a huge number of students in your career. And as you mentioned, that great transformations have happened on the technology front, manpower requirements, training. And as an IMPC chair, you have an Institute Education Commission for training of young professionals, so on and so forth. So what would be your advice? How do we go forward in attracting talented young professional students into the profession?
Well, that's a huge question. Rob Dunn, who, as you know, edited the latest handbook, contacted me recently. He's an old friend of mine, as I mentioned earlier. What are my views exactly on that? And I related to him a story which he knew, and he had sort of not recalled. In about 1983 or 4, I came to a conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, on column flotation with Rob. And we spent 2 days in Toronto with Glenn Dobby. And Glenn Dobby, you know Glenn, was struggling to get students. And I said, Glenn, I think you guys have got the wrong model. But I said, you know, don't take it from me, because at the University of Cape Town, we've just stayed with chemical engineering. We don't have a minerals processing or metallurgy department. And serendipitously, and it was no master plan, I think we got it right. Because we produce 1/3 of the country's minerals processing engineers, but they are called chemical engineers. In their undergraduate program, they have to, every student has to do so many optional courses. So the minerals group of courses are optional, but anybody who's got a bursary from a mining company has to do those. So there are optional courses in catalytic processing, optional courses in biochemical engineering, optional courses in minerals processing. But when the student graduates, they want to have a degree which will take them wherever they want to go. With a chemical engineering degree, as you know, you can go into the pharmaceutical industry, the food industry, the petrochemical industry, the mining industry. And I think they want that flexibility. So some of the countries where I think there's a problem, and obviously the exception to all of these is China, because at Central South University, they've got a faculty of minerals processing with 500 postgraduates. But I mean, the population is so huge. But I think in North America, the better model would be to embed your minerals processing into chemical engineering, and let the students register for chemical engineering. Because again, as you know, the basics are the same: mass and energy balances, heat transfer, fluid flow, reactor design, thermodynamics. I mean, so I think we've got to give the students those opportunities. I think they may think they want to get locked into this. They lived in a mining town. They went to school in Denver. It's a big mining town, so they want to do minerals processing. Wow, lo and behold, they get to the age of 30, married 2 little kids. The mine that they were working in closed down. Where do I go for a job? So I think they should be given the opportunity. It's the same as mechanical engineering. When I was dean, I was under a lot of pressure to set up a program in aeronautical engineering. And I said, no, aeronautical engineering is a postgraduate specialization. You've got to get the tools, the toolbox of mechanical engineering before you can do that. So I think to talk about what we should be doing from an educational front, and I think Australia is a very good example where they are now struggling to keep those minerals processing metallurgy departments functional, because the kids don't want to get into the mining industry, but you can sucker them into it in a sense. Get them into chemical engineering. Don't call it, call the courses particle analysis or particle technology, which is sieving and screening and particle size analysis. So I think from an educational point of view, that's one of the important things. The second point, I think that we were talking about it earlier, and you and your sustainability initiatives, I think the exciting opportunity we have is IT and AI in the industry. If we can sell the industry as an exciting profession where you don't necessarily, look, you've got to wear overalls and gumboots sometime in your life to find out what it's like underground. But if we can sell the industry as an exciting industry where they can take all that stuff that they love and use it profitably in the industry. We've heard from Osvaldo this morning about remote sites managing. So I think the paradigm has got to change.
You have worked very hard and you spent a lot of hours in the office. I'm sure you did. So how did you maintain a work-life balance?
Okay, well, I'll tell you, I love my sport. So Saturday was for sport. Played cricket, and then I took up golf. So when I retired, I said I'm not in on Wednesdays, so I play golf every Wednesday and Saturday. But before I retired, golf was important for me. And the second point is that, so I would work every night except Friday night and Saturday night. I had a pact with my wife. Friday night and Saturday night, I'm not at my desk. We do whatever we want to do. And Sundays I would work Sunday morning, Sunday evening. So I was lucky that I had a wife who understood that and herself was actively professionally engaged. I think I had to watch the balance, because I don't think I saw colleagues of mine, especially I've seen colleagues of mine who retired and never got off the treadmill. And I think I've been lucky to get off the treadmill. So, for example, I'm not in the classroom anymore. Now, I love teaching, but I don't want to mark papers. And I thought, I've done my national service and marking papers, sitting for a whole weekend marking design, final year design. So I'm not going to mark papers. So, but I still go in and lecture small modules and that. So I love teaching. So, when I was obviously full-time employee, even when I was a dean, I continued to lecture Reactor Design 2, which was full-blown reactor design. One was more reaction kinetics, and thermodynamics, the major thermodynamics course. So I lectured all those, and people all say, why are you doing that? I said, because if I'm not in the classroom, I've lost touch. You've got to be in the classroom. So while I was actively engaged before I retired, but I think the question that you ask is a profoundly important one, because you can so easily fall into a situation where your work is your life, and as I say, I've always enjoyed my sport, and what I enjoyed about my sport, I'd mix with other people. I'd mix with people who are doing totally different stuff and who weren't interested in university. They weren't interested that you're a professor. What is a professor? It's sheltered employment. So that was always keep you down to earth. And so, yeah.
Is there anything else would you like to add to what we have discussed so far?
I just want to say that because you're an old hand at this, you mentioned the National Academy of Engineering. I think you were asking about that. I didn't know that I was being nominated, and I understand I'm not supposed to know. But the person who nominated me sent me a couple of emails every now and then, and I wondered, what do you want this information for? I thought maybe there was a position or something. That was Doug Firstenaar. So Doug nominated me. He told me that after I made it, he said, by the way, let me tell you the story. And Doug loves telling you those stories. So I think, you talk about lucky breaks. I was just incredibly fortunate that I had somebody like Doug Firstenau to nominate me, and he was incredibly kind. Because it took me by total surprise, and in fact, that was 2 years ago, and I was the only foreign member from the African continent, which I thought was crazy, because there's so many people more deserving of this than I am. But so that was actually a little bit of a pinnacle, I would say, in my career. And I'm not saying it because I'm here in the United States, but there's no question that the United States National Academy of Engineering is arguably the most prestigious, and to become a foreign member of that is quite humbling. So yeah, that's meant a lot to me.
Thank you, Cyril.
To meet you at the induction was also, and others that I know who are, it's been like joining a club that I never thought I'd ever get anywhere near. So thanks, Brij.
Thank you, Cyril. We appreciate that.